"Uncle, don't eat. They put something in your food," the little girl shouts at the millionaire in the restaurant. Richard Parker was bringing the fork to his mouth when he heard his niece's desperate scream. Little Emma, just 5 years old, had stood up from her chair and was pointing directly at his plate with wide, panicked eyes. "Uncle, don't eat that," she shouted again, causing several people in the restaurant to turn and stare. Richard froze, confused. He had taken his niece to dinner at the city's finest restaurant as part of her visit to New York City. The girl was spending a week with him while her parents were away on business. "Emma, what's wrong?" he asked, lowering the fork. The girl ran to him, her blonde hair swaying with the movement, and whispered in his ear, "I saw that man with glasses put something on your plate when you went to the bathroom." Richard glanced around the elegant restaurant. Several people were watching them, some whispering among themselves. The setting, with its white tablecloths and golden chandeliers, seemed like the last place something like this could happen. "Which man, Emma?" The girl discreetly pointed to a table in the corner. A middle-aged man wearing sunglasses indoors pretended to read a newspaper. When he noticed he was being watched, he quickly stood up and left. Richard felt a chill. Over the past few months, his company had gone through a complicated merger, and he'd made some enemies in the process. But poisoning food seemed like something out of a movie. "I'm sure of what I saw, Uncle," Emma insisted, gripping his arm. "He sprinkled some white powder on your meat." The businessman looked at his plate. The sauce could easily hide any substance. His mind raced. Emma was unusually observant for her age, always noticing details adults missed. "Waiter," Richard called, signaling the server who had attended them. "Yes, sir? I need to speak to the manager immediately." While waiting, Richard picked Emma up. The girl was still visibly shaken, her blue eyes glistening with held-back tears. "You did the right thing telling me," he said, kissing her forehead. "Always trust what you see." The manager arrived, a polished man in an impeccable uniform. "How may I assist you, Mr. Parker?" "My niece saw someone put something on my plate. I'd like you to preserve the food for analysis." The manager paled. "Sir, this is very serious. I'll call our security team right away." "No," Richard interrupted. "For now, just secure the plate. I don't want a scene." The businessman knew he had to act carefully. If this really was an attempted poisoning, his enemies might try again, and now Emma was involved. They left the restaurant, and Richard took his niece back to the apartment. On the way, the girl stayed quiet, clearly still shaken by what she'd witnessed. "Uncle, why would someone do that to you?" she asked once they got home. Richard knelt in front of her, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes, Emma, when we work in business, some people get angry with us. But don't worry, I'll handle it." Truthfully, Richard was more worried than he let on. Over the past 6 months, since taking over as president of the tech company he'd inherited from his father, he'd faced resistance from several partners. The merger with a competitor had been especially controversial. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Richard called his lawyer. "I need you to discreetly investigate what happened today," he explained the situation. "Richard, this is very serious. Maybe we should call the police." "Not yet. I don't have concrete proof. Just the testimony of a 5-year-old child. I need more information first." The next morning, Emma woke up more excited and asked to go to the park. Richard, who had planned to work, decided spending time with his niece was more important. While she played on the playground, he got a call from his main partner, Michael Thompson. "Richard, I heard there was a problem at the restaurant yesterday. How did you hear about that?" "News travels fast in our line of work. Are you okay?" Richard was suspicious of Michael's overly concerned tone. The two had argued a lot about the direction of the company recently. "I'm fine. It was just a misunderstanding." "That's good. By the way, I need to talk to you about the new contracts. Can we meet today?" "I'm with my niece. We'll talk Monday." When he hung up, Richard noticed Emma had stopped playing and was watching him. "Uncle, you're worried," she said, walking over to him. The little girl's ability to read his expressions constantly surprised him. "A little," he admitted, "but nothing you need to worry about." "Can I help?" she asked, far too serious for a 5-year-old. Richard smiled despite the tension. You already helped me a lot yesterday. Just keep being my clever niece. On the way back home, they stopped at a pharmacy. Richard wanted to buy something for his headache, but Emma pulled him toward the vitamins. Uncle, you need to take these, she said, pointing to a bottle. Mom always says they protect us from bad things. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, Richard bought the vitamins more to please Emma than because he believed they'd protect him from poisoners. But the girl's innocence touched him. During lunch at home, Emma insisted on tasting all the food before Richard ate. Emma, you don't have to do that, he said. Yes, I do. I'm your bodyguard now, she replied seriously, making Richard laugh for the first time since the incident. The afternoon was interrupted by another call, this time from his secretary. Mr. Richard, Mr. Michael stopped by earlier, asking about your weekend plans. He said it was urgent. Richard was unsettled. Michael rarely came to the office on Saturdays, let alone asked about his personal life. Did he say what he wanted? No, sir. He just asked if you'd be in town, and if you'd still have your niece with you. After hanging up, Richard felt even more uneasy. How did Michael know about Emma? He'd only mentioned his niece to a handful of people. Emma, who was coloring in the living room, looked up. Uncle, you're making that worried face again. Sorry, kiddo, just thinking about work. You work too much, she said, turning back to her drawings. Daddy always says you work harder than anyone. Richard walked over to see what she was drawing. It was a man in a suit next to a little girl, apparently in a restaurant. Is this about yesterday? He asked. Yes, I want to remember so I can tell Mommy and Daddy. Emma, about that. Maybe it's better not to tell your parents yet. They might worry. The girl stopped coloring and looked at him. But it's not right to hide things, Uncle. You always say that. Richard sighed. Emma was right, but he didn't want to alarm his brother and sister-in-law unnecessarily. You're right. We'll tell them when they get back from their trip. On Sunday, Richard decided to take Emma out for lunch somewhere different, a simpler restaurant in the neighborhood. During the meal, she continued her self-appointed mission of tasting everything first. Emma, you don't need to... Yes, I do, she interrupted him, taking a spoonful of rice to her mouth. It's fine, Uncle. You can eat. As they ate lunch, Richard noticed a man sitting alone at a nearby table. It wasn't the same man from the fancy restaurant, but something about his posture made Richard uneasy. The man seemed to be watching them discreetly. Emma, when you finish eating, we'll leave quickly, he whispered. The girl noticed the change in his tone and agreed without question. As they left, Richard's suspicions were confirmed. The man followed them. They hurried into the car, and Richard took a longer route home to make sure they weren't being tailed. Uncle, was someone watching us? Emma asked in the elevator. Her perception continued to surprise him. Maybe. You're very observant, Emma. Mom always says I see things no one else does. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Richard received a strange call. Mr. Parker, said a voice he didn't recognize. Yes? You might want to reconsider your stance on the merger. Some people aren't happy. Who is this? The line went silent. Richard hung up, his heart racing. The threat had been subtle but clear. Someone was really trying to force him to change his position on the company's dealings. He checked to make sure Emma was asleep, then went to his home office. He needed to understand what was happening. He began reviewing all the documents related to the merger, searching for anything that could explain the extreme hostility from some partners. He found something interesting in the contracts, a clause that would give Michael majority control of the company if Richard stepped down as president for any reason, including health issues. Everything started to make sense. If Richard were hospitalized from poisoning, even if he survived, Michael could claim he wasn't fit to continue in his role. On Monday morning, Richard took Emma to the private school where she was temporarily enrolled during her stay. The girl had adjusted well, but he noticed she was clingier than usual. Uncle, will you pick me up today? She asked, gripping his hand tighter than normal. Of course. Why do you ask? I just want to be sure. At the office that day, Richard called a meeting with all the key partners. Michael arrived with a smile that seemed too forced. "Richard, you look tired. Maybe you should take a vacation," Michael said in front of the others. "I'm fine, thank you." During the meeting, Richard watched Michael's every reaction as they discussed the merger terms. His partner was clearly eager for Richard to change his position. After the meeting, Richard pretended to leave early but discreetly returned to the building to go through Michael's files. He found several calls to unrecognized numbers and deleted emails with vague references to taking care of the Richard problem. When he picked Emma up from school, the girl ran to him with a new drawing. "I made this for you, Uncle," she said, showing a picture of a man being protected by a little girl. "It's beautiful, Emma." "Thank you." The teacher said it's important to protect the people we love. That night at dinner, Emma asked a question that caught Richard off guard. "Uncle, are you scared?" Richard stopped eating and looked at her. "Sometimes." "Why?" "You've seemed worried since that day at the restaurant, but don't worry, I'll take care of you." The innocence and determination in the girl's words moved him. At 5 years old, Emma was trying to protect him from a danger she barely understood. "Emma, you're the bravest niece in the world," he said, kissing her forehead. On Tuesday, Richard decided to test his suspicions. He scheduled a business lunch with Michael at the same elegant restaurant as Friday. This time, however, he left Emma at school with instructions for the nanny to pick her up later. During lunch, Richard observed Michael's every move. When he went to the restroom, he discreetly left his phone recording on the table. Upon returning, he noticed Michael seemed nervous. "You look worried, Michael," Richard remarked. "No, just thinking about business." Richard ate his meal normally, but noticed Michael barely touched his food. When he got home, he listened to the recording. It had captured Michael's voice speaking quietly on the phone. "No, not today. Too many people are watching." The confirmation that Michael was involved left Richard furious, but he knew he needed more evidence before acting. Emma came home from school more excited than usual. "Uncle, I learned a new song today. Want to hear it?" "Of course." She sang a song about friendship and protection, her sweet voice filling the apartment. For a moment, Richard forgot all his troubles and simply enjoyed his niece's company. "Emma, you know I love you very much, right?" "I love you too, Uncle. You're my favorite uncle." "I'm your only uncle," he laughed. "Even so, you'd still be my favorite." That night, Richard received another threatening call. "Mr. Parker, your stubbornness is starting to bother us. Perhaps you should reconsider your choices." "Who is this? What do you want?" "We want you to be more flexible regarding business. It'd be a shame if something happened to your family." The line went dead again, but this time the threat had included Emma. Richard felt a rage he'd never experienced before. He checked that Emma was asleep, then called his lawyer. "I need you to investigate Michael Thompson discreetly, and I want protection for my niece." "Richard, this is getting too serious. We need to involve the authorities. I don't have enough proof yet, but I won't let them hurt Emma." On Wednesday, Richard quietly hired a security guard to watch Emma's school. The girl didn't notice, but Richard felt better knowing she was protected. During lunch at home, Emma made another sharp observation. "Uncle, that friend of yours, Michael, isn't very nice." "Why do you say that?" "I saw him looking at you angrily once, and yesterday he passed by the front of the building and kept looking up." Richard was alarmed. Was Michael watching the apartment? "When was this, Emma?" "In the morning while I was brushing my teeth. He was across the street." Richard closed all the curtains and started forming a plan. He needed to protect Emma while exposing Michael. "Emma, how about staying at Grandma's for a few days?" "Why? Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart. It's just, I have some work things to sort out and you'd be safer there." "But who'll take care of you?" The girl's genuine concern touched Richard's heart. "I'll be fine. It's just a few days. Promise you'll take care of yourself?" "I promise." On Thursday, Richard took Emma to his mother's house outside the city. The girl wasn't happy but understood it was important. "Uncle, when you sort everything out, will you come get me?" "Of course." "And will you tell me what happened?" "I'll tell you everything." With Emma safe, Richard returned to the city determined to confront Michael. But first, he needed more evidence. On Friday, Richard pretended to be sick and didn't go to work. Instead, he hired a private investigator to follow Michael. What they discovered shocked him. Michael had been meeting regularly with two men who had criminal records related to corporate intimidation. They gathered in an office downtown registered under a shell company. The detective managed to record part of a conversation where Michael was discussing eliminating the obstacle Richard to finally gain full control of the company. Richard now had the evidence he needed. On Saturday morning, Richard called an urgent meeting with all the company's partners. He said he had important information about the merger. Michael arrived confidently, clearly thinking Richard would finally yield to the pressure. "Well, Richard, I hope you have good news for us," Michael said. "I do," Richard replied, turning on a recorder. "I have some very interesting information about you, Michael." Michael's expression changed instantly. "What are you talking about?" Richard played the recordings of the phone threats and the conversations the detective had captured. Michael's face grew paler by the second. This proves nothing," Michael stammered. "It proves you tried to poison me at the restaurant last week. It proves you hired people to threaten me. And it proves you planned to take control of the company if anything happened to me." The other partners looked back and forth between Michael and Richard, shocked. "Richard, this is very serious," said one of the senior partners. "Very serious indeed," Richard agreed. "And if it weren't for my 5-year-old niece, I might be in the hospital right now. Or worse." Michael tried to stand up, but Richard continued. "Emma saw you put something in my food. A 5-year-old was more observant than all the adults in the restaurant." "A child isn't a reliable witness," Michael argued desperately. "But the recordings and the detective's evidence are," Richard countered. The meeting ended with Michael being forced to sell his shares and leave the company. The other partners voted unanimously to remove him from the partnership. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Richard immediately went to pick up Emma from her mother's house. The little girl ran to him as soon as she saw him arrive. "Uncle, did you fix everything?" "I did, little one. Thanks to you." "Thanks to me. If you hadn't warned me about the food, I could have gotten really sick." Emma hugged him tightly. "I told you I'd take care of you." Back at the apartment, Richard made Emma's favorite dinner to celebrate. During the meal, she inspected his food as usual, even though she knew the danger had passed. "Force of habit," she explained, making Richard laugh. On Sunday, Richard got a call from Emma's parents. They'd be back from their trip on Monday. "How was the week with Emma?" his brother asked. "It was educational," Richard replied, watching his niece play in the living room. "She taught me a lot about courage. She really is special. More than you realize." Monday morning, as they packed Emma's things for her departure, she found the drawing she'd made of the restaurant incident. "Uncle, can I keep this drawing?" "Of course, why?" "To remember that sometimes kids see things adults don't." Richard knelt in front of her. "Emma, you saved my life. Never forget that." "And you taught me that family protects family," she replied solemnly. When Emma's parents arrived, Richard told them the whole story. At first, they were shocked, but then proud of their daughter. "Emma's always been very observant," her mother said, "but I never imagined it would save someone's life." "She has a special gift," Richard said, "and a lot of courage." In the following months, Richard's company thrived without Michael's interference. The merger was completed successfully, and Richard maintained full control of operations. Emma visited regularly, and Richard always made sure to take her out to dinner at different restaurants. She kept the habit of observing everything around her, but now more out of curiosity than necessity. "Uncle, don't you worry anymore?" she asked during one of these visits. "No, Emma. I've learned I have the best bodyguard in the world." "Who?" "You." Emma smiled, proud of her role in protecting her uncle. 6 months after the incident, Richard received a letter at the company. It was from Michael, sent from another state where he had moved. "Richard, I know I don't deserve forgiveness for what I did. Greed blinded me, and I almost made a terrible mistake. Your niece didn't just save your life. She saved me from becoming someone much worse. I hope one day you can forgive me." Richard kept the letter without responding. Some mistakes were too big to be forgiven easily. During lunch that day, Richard called Emma. "Hi, Uncle," she answered cheerfully. "Hi, little one. I just wanted to thank you again." "For what?" "For saving my life." "Uncle, you've thanked me 1,000,000 times already. And I'll thank you 1,000,000 times more." Emma laughed on the other end of the line. "Okay, but you have to stop worrying so much." "I'll try." "Promise?" "I promise." On the first anniversary of the restaurant incident, Richard organized a special party for Emma. He invited the whole family and some close friends. During the party, he made a special toast. "Exactly 1 year ago, my niece Emma taught me the most important lesson of my life, that sometimes wisdom comes from the most unexpected places. A 5-year-old child saw what no adult did and had the courage to act." Everyone applauded, and Emma turned red with embarrassment but was clearly proud. "Emma," Richard continued, "you taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about protecting each other. Thank you for being my hero." The girl, now 6, ran to hug him. "Uncle, you're so dramatic," she whispered in his ear, making him laugh. Later, as the party was winding down, Emma approached Richard. "Uncle, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you still get scared sometimes?" Richard thought for a moment before answering. "Sometimes, yes, but now I know I'm not alone. I have you watching over me." "I'll always watch over you," she promised, "and I'll always watch over you too." "That's how family works," she said, repeating something she'd learned. "Exactly." 2 years later, Richard was having lunch with Emma, now 8, when she made an observation that surprised him. "Uncle, did you notice that waiter is nervous?" Richard glanced at the waiter serving them. The young man did seem anxious. "How do you know?" "He's shaking a little and sweating, just like you used to when you were worried." Emma's observational skills had only sharpened with age. "Maybe he's new to the job," Richard suggested. "Or maybe he's hiding something," Emma said, making Richard laugh. "Not everyone is up to something, Emma." "I know," she smiled, "but it's good to stay alert." Richard realized Emma had learned to balance her observant nature with a healthy attitude toward the world. She didn't live in fear, but kept her eyes open. "You've grown so much, Emma," he said. "You too, Uncle. You smile more now." Richard reflected on that. It was true. Since Michael had left his life, he'd become more relaxed and happy. "You know why?" he asked. "Why?" "Because I've learned I can trust the right people, and you're one of them." Emma smiled and went back to eating, satisfied with the answer. That same year, Richard decided to create a mentorship program at the company, inspired by his experience with Emma. The program paired seasoned executives with young talent, emphasizing the importance of listening to different perspectives. "It was my niece's idea," he explained to the employees. "She taught me that wisdom has no age limit." Emma, when she found out about the program, was proud, but also a little embarrassed by the attention. "Uncle, you didn't have to tell everyone," she complained. "Why not? You have amazing ideas." "Because now everyone will expect me to give advice." Richard laughed at her concern. "And what's the problem? I'm only 8, I don't know everything. But you know important things, and that's already a lot." Over the years, the bond between Richard and Emma grew even stronger. She became his most trusted confidant, always offering unique perspectives on the challenges he faced. When Emma turned 10, Richard took her back to the restaurant where it had all begun. The place had changed owners, but the elegant atmosphere remained the same. "Remember this place?" he asked. "How could I forget?" she replied, looking around. "This is where I saved your life. And this is where you taught me to trust the instincts of the people I love." They sat in the same area where they had been years before. Emma, now older, observed the surroundings with less tension but still attentively. "Uncle, can I ask you a serious question?" "Of course." "Do you still think about what might have happened if I hadn't seen that man?" Richard stopped eating and looked at her. "Sometimes, but I prefer to think about what actually happened. You were there, you saw the danger, and you protected me. What if I hadn't been there? But you were, and that's what matters." Emma nodded, satisfied with the answer. "Sometimes I think about it too," she admitted, "and I'm glad I was there." "Me too." They finished their meal in comfortable silence, each reflecting on how that moment had changed their lives. A few months later, Richard received an unexpected call. It was a detective informing him that Michael had been arrested in another state for attempted corporate fraud. "Seems he kept up with the illegal practices," the detective explained. "This time he wasn't so lucky." Richard felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that justice had been served, sadness at how Michael had wasted his life. When he told Emma, her reaction surprised him. "Uncle, are you sad for him?" "A little," Richard admitted. "He was my friend once." "But he tried to hurt you." "Yes, he did. But it's still sad to see someone destroy their own life." Emma thought about it for a moment. "Uncle, you're a really good person." "Why?" "Because even after everything he did, you still care about him." Richard hugged his niece, moved by her maturity. "Emma, you teach me something new every day. And you teach me too, Uncle." On the 5th anniversary of the incident, Richard and Emma made it a tradition to visit the original restaurant every year on that date. This time, Emma was 13 and much more grown up. "Uncle, can I tell you a secret?" she asked during dinner. "Of course. Sometimes I pretend not to see strange things because I don't want people to think I'm paranoid." Richard grew concerned. "Emma, never ignore your instincts because of what others might think. But what if I'm wrong? What if you're right? It's better to be too careful than careless." "That's what you taught me," she smiled. "And that's what you taught me too." They laughed together, recognizing how much they had learned from each other over the years. "Uncle, thank you for always believing in me," Emma said. "Thank you for always protecting me," Richard replied. It was a fair exchange that perfectly defined their relationship. When Emma turned 15, Richard took her to visit the company. She was impressed by the size and sophistication of the place. "Is all this yours, Uncle?" "Technically, yes, but I prefer to think of it as ours." "Ours?" "The family's. One day, if you want, you can be part of it." Emma looked around, considering the possibility. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. You have time." During the visit, Emma noticed how the employees interacted with Richard. It was clear they respected and liked him. "Uncle, you're a good boss," she remarked at the end of the day. "How do you know?" "I see how people talk to you. They're not afraid, but they respect you." Once again, Richard was struck by Emma's insight. "You really see everything, don't you? You taught me to pay attention. Actually, you already knew. I just learned from you." In the years that followed, Emma kept up her tradition of testing Richard's food whenever they dined together, even though she knew there was no danger anymore. It had become a playful ritual between them. "Safety protocol," she'd say every time, making Richard laugh. When Emma graduated from high school, Richard threw a special party for her. During his speech, he mentioned how she had changed his life. "At 5 years old, Emma taught me the most valuable lesson I've ever learned, that heroism has no age limit, and sometimes the most unlikely people are the ones who save us." Emma, now an 18-year-old young woman, was moved by her uncle's words. "Uncle, you're being dramatic again," she said afterward, though she was clearly touched. "It's a special occasion," he defended. "Every occasion is special to you when it comes to me." Exactly. Emma decided to study psychology in college, inspired by her natural ability to read people and situations. "I want to better understand why I see the things I see," she explained to Richard. "You'll make an excellent psychologist," he said proudly. "How do you know?" "Because you have a gift for seeing beyond appearances." During her college years, Emma and Richard stayed in regular contact. She often consulted her uncle about cases studied in class, and he was always impressed by her insights. My professor said I have a natural talent for detecting lies, Emma shared during one of her visits. Doesn't surprise me, Richard laughed. You always knew when I was worried, even when I tried to hide it. It was easy. You made that face. What face? Emma exaggeratedly mimicked Richard's worried expression, making him laugh. I don't make that face. Yes, you do, she insisted, still laughing. Moments like these reminded Richard how Emma had brought lightness into his life, even amid challenges. When Emma graduated with her psychology degree, Richard was in the front row at the ceremony. He couldn't hold back tears as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. Uncle, you're crying, Emma observed afterward. I'm proud, he explained. You're always proud of me. Because you always give me reasons to be. Emma hugged her uncle, grateful for his unwavering support all those years. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for saving me, he replied, as he always did. It was a conversation they'd had hundreds of times, yet it never lost its meaning. 2 years after graduating, Emma opened her own psychology practice. Richard insisted on being her first patient, though it was more of a joke than a real necessity. And how do you feel about your relationship with your niece? Emma asked in a professional tone during the session. I think she saved my life and has kept saving me every day since, Richard played along. Interesting. And do you think this has created any kind of emotional dependency? Absolutely. I'm completely dependent on her affection and wisdom. They laughed together, but there was truth in the playful words. Uncle, seriously now, do you think I chose psychology because of what happened when I was a child? Richard reflected on the question. Maybe in part, but I think you chose it because you have a natural gift for understanding people. The incident at the restaurant just showed that. You might be right, Emma agreed. I usually am, Richard teased. Usually not, Emma shot back, continuing the banter. On the 10th anniversary of the restaurant incident, Richard and Emma decided to do something different. Instead of visiting the restaurant, they hosted a family dinner at home. During the meal, Richard retold the story of how Emma had saved his life. Even after so many years, the family still got emotional hearing it. Emma has always been special, her mother said, but I never imagined that quality would save someone's life. She didn't just save my life, Richard added. She changed my perspective on everything. How so? Asked one of the cousins. She taught me that sometimes answers come from the most unexpected places, that we should always listen no matter the age or position of the person speaking. Emma, now an established 28-year-old psychologist, was moved by her uncle's words. Uncle, you're being dramatic again, she said, repeating her signature phrase. And you're still my hero, he replied, echoing his own. The family laughed, recognizing the special bond between uncle and niece. A few months later, Emma received an unexpected call. A reporter had uncovered the story of the restaurant incident and wanted to write a piece about how a child had saved a businessman's life. I'm not sure I want to talk about this publicly, Emma told Richard. It's your choice, he said, but remember, your story could inspire others. You think so? I think it could teach parents to listen more to their children, and it could teach kids that their voices matter. Emma considered this and finally agreed to the interview. The article made a big impact, especially among families with young children. Richard received several calls from parents saying the story had inspired them to pay more attention to their kids' observations. See, Richard told Emma, your story is helping people. It's strange to think something that happened when I was 5 is still making a difference, Emma reflected. The best lessons often start early. Emma smiled, recognizing the wisdom in her uncle's words. Uncle, can I ask you something? Always. If you could go back in time, would you change anything about that day? Richard thought carefully before answering. I'd change the fact that Michael tried to poison me, of course, but I wouldn't change you being there to save me. Why? Because that was the moment that showed me the extraordinary person you are, and it was the moment that brought us closer. Emma was touched by his answer. I wouldn't change anything either, she said, except maybe I'd have screamed louder. They laughed together, as they always did, when remembering that moment. Today, 15 years after the incident, Richard and Emma keep a tradition of dining together at least once a month. Emma, now a respected psychologist, often shares stories about her patients, without breaking confidentiality, of course, and Richard is always impressed by her insight. "You still see things others don't," he said during one of these dinners. "I learned from the best teacher," she replied. "Who?" "Life and you." Richard smiled, pleased to know he had contributed to his niece's growth as much as she had contributed to his. During one of their monthly visits, Emma made a confession that surprised Richard. "Uncle, remember that time you asked if I'd change anything about that day?" "Yes. I lied a little. There is one thing I'd change." "What?" "I wish I'd been older at the time so I could have understood better what was happening." "Why?" "Because maybe I could have helped more. Maybe I could have noticed the signs sooner." Richard was deeply moved by her answer. "Emma, you were 5 years old. What you did was extraordinary at any age, but especially for a child." "I know. But sometimes I think I could have done more. You saved my life. There's no more than that." Emma smiled, comforted by her uncle's words. "Thank you for always reminding me of that. Thank you for always reminding me of what truly matters." It was an exchange that perfectly defined their relationship: mutual gratitude and unconditional love. On Richard's last birthday, Emma prepared a special surprise. She had created a photo album with all the important moments they'd shared since the incident at the restaurant. "Uncle, this is your gift," she said, handing him the album. Richard flipped through the pages, seeing photos of them at various restaurants, at graduations, on family vacations, and in casual moments at home. "Emma, this is beautiful. Look at the last page." On the last page was a photo of the two of them at the restaurant where it all began, taken during one of their annual visits, alongside a handwritten letter from Emma. "Uncle Richard, 15 years ago, a 5-year-old girl screamed at you not to eat your food. At that moment, neither of us knew we were starting a journey that would change our lives forever. You always say I saved your life that day, but the truth is, you saved mine too. You taught me that my voice matters, that my observations have value, and that being different is a gift, not a flaw. Thank you for always believing in me, for listening to me when I was just a child, and for still listening now that I'm an adult. Thank you for teaching me that family is about mutual protection and unconditional love. You're not just my uncle, you're my hero, my mentor, and my best friend. With all my love, Emma." Richard finished reading the letter with tears in his eyes. "Emma, this is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever written to me." "It's the truth," she said simply. "You know I love you so much, right?" "I know. And you know I love you just as much." Richard hugged his niece, grateful to have such a special person in his life. "Emma, what do you think is the most important lesson we've learned from all this?" Emma thought for a moment before answering. "I think it's that we never know where our salvation will come from. It could be a 5-year-old screaming in a restaurant, a moment of intuition, or someone we love. What matters is being open to receiving help and being willing to give it too." Richard was struck by the depth of her answer. "You've grown so much since that brave 5-year-old girl." "I have, but I'm still the same person who cares about you and wants to protect you. And I'm still the same person who feels lucky to have you in my life." They hugged again, celebrating not just Richard's birthday, but the entire journey they'd shared. As they looked through the album together, Richard reflected on how a terrible situation had become the foundation of an extraordinary relationship. Emma had truly saved his life that day at the restaurant, but more than that, she had enriched every day since. "Uncle, what are you thinking about?" Emma asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am." "Why?" "Because 15 years ago, a very special little girl taught me that heroes come in all sizes, and some of them wear pink dresses and are 5 years old." Emma laughed, remembering the dress she wore that day. "And that little girl learned that uncles can become the best friends in the world." It was the perfect ending to a story that had begun with fear and turned into love, protection, and a family bond that would last forever. The end. This story shows us how the most unexpected moments can change our lives. Emma teaches us that courage has no age and that we should always trust our instincts. What do you all think of Emma's brave attitude? Have you ever been in a situation where a child's intuition was crucial? Share your experiences in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.